Welcome to the Choice Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Nastasha McKeon, founder and CEO of Choice Juicery, author of Plant Food is Medicine, and naturally a health, wellness, and mindfulness enthusiast. I believe that happiness is a choice, and I built my company upon this ethos. This show is a platform where we will discuss all things health, wellness, and mindfulness in hopes of inspiring you further on your journey. We will be sharing inspiring stories, health, wellness, and mindfulness hacks, as well as anything else pertaining to living your best choice life. My hope is that you may hear something on every episode of this podcast that will genuinely be of value in your life. Welcome back to the Choice Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Nastasha McKeon, founder and CEO of Choice Juicery, as well as author of Plant Food is Medicine. This episode, as well as every other episode, is sponsored by Choice Juicery. If you want to support this show, you can do so by visiting any of our locations in Southern California. We have 7 locations, with 6 being in San Diego, and we have 1 in Orange County currently in San Clemente. Of course, if you're not local to San Diego or Orange County, you can visit us online at choicejuicery.com, where you can find dozens of products that we're now shipping nationally, including our amazing Super Loaf. It's a gluten-free, plant-based bread that's pretty much to die for. My personal favorite. Of course, I am a little biased, so don't just take it from me. Go ahead and check out the reviews online, and I think you'll see we have a lot of happy customers. We're also shipping our whole line of elixirs, our nut butters, as well as our greens powders, all your daily greens and prebiotics in a scoop. We also ship our protein powder and our super seed granola. So lots of products on there. You can support us that way. Also, my cookbook is available on that website as well. And we hope that you will check out our website and what we have to offer. Today's guest, Steven Jaggers. I'm really excited, as always, to introduce you to this guest. This is somebody who I have a lot of admiration for, somebody who had a big part in impacting my life. This is my personal breathwork coach, the person who trained me in the modality that I'm trained in. Steven Jaggers is the founder of Somatic Breathwork, which changed my life and inspired me to want to take that into the world, and why I now practice breathwork and teach breathwork outside of Choice. And he's also the host of the Mind Body Mentor podcast. And overall, I'd say he is a wellness expert. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Steven Jaggers, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. What an honor, Nastasha. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you here for many reasons. I am obviously a huge fan of your work and what you're doing in the world, but also I've been the personal beneficiary of your gift and had a major transformation after attending the training for your somatic release breath work, and rocked my world. And I had my own experience with receiving the breath work and then holding space for the breath work. And my life has just been, a catalyst for me in a lot of ways. So I'm excited to share what exactly that breath work is. All the listeners already know that you're the founder of Somatic Release Breathwork, but what is that? What is Somatic Release Breathwork?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for that. And it's been an honor to watch your evolution with this work. And I know how much of a high performer you are in a multitude of different areas, being a mom and a business owner and a practitioner. And those are just some of the hats that you wear. So it's been really cool to watch your evolution with it. And so what is somatic breathwork? Well, first off, when I first started it, I did call it somatic release breathwork. And that was part of my journey was, for those of you that don't necessarily have a background on me, I was a body worker for a long time, amongst a multitude of other things, and helping people release stress, tension, align their physical body, and also, doing a lot of somatic based body work that was helping people release a lot of emotions and nervous system defenses that are kind of stuck in their body. And within that, throughout my journey of helping people have a release of some sort, whether it's an emotional release, whether it's a physical release, whether it's a stress release, tension release. What I found that it's actually never about the release specifically. Like it's about the space that's created from that release to actually bring in and embody what you want to, right? It's never about the release. And so we did actually change the name from somatic release breath work to just somatic breath work. So
Okay.
I know it's
Thank
been a
you for
while since
correcting me. Yeah, it has.
no, yeah, it's okay. That has been part of our journey as well. And so somatic breath work it's a tool, it's a technique, it's an amalgamation of a few different modalities that I have found really beneficial to help someone reset their nervous system. And for those of you that don't realize, our nervous system is sort of central command for everything else. It is the bridge between the mind and the body, and it is really the forefront of our experience, and it's the thing that's controlling both of our mind and our body. And we live in a world where we have a lot of people just working with the body: chiropractors, physical therapists, body workers, yoga teachers. We have a lot of people that are working with just the mind, counselors, therapists, psychologists. But what I'm really fascinated in is the connection in between, because you cannot separate them. They affect each other. And when it comes to somatic breath work, it is a tool and a technique to help people move out of a lot of it's societal, but helping people move out of a chronic state of fight or flight that is not just in their body, but also in their mind, and helping them move to a state of, openness and embodiment and clarity and purpose within their life. And we can get into all the nitty gritty around the specifics, but there's a multitude of ways to speak about somatic breath work. And I can speak about it from a physiological perspective or a metaphysical perspective, depending on what people are interested in.
Who we're talking to. I love what you said about it not being so much about the release, but in the space that's created. And also, the whole idea that there's stuff stored in the body. When I used to say this to I was diagnosed with PTSD from my childhood, and I was on a 15-year healing journey, and I went through every modality out there from, talk therapy to EMDR to, dabbled in plant medicine. I did everything under the sun trying to find healing. And I used to tell people there are certain things I'm like, it's in my body. I would say that, and therapists would look at me and not know what to do with me. They're just like, blank stare in their face. Like they didn't understand what I meant when I said it's in my body. Like certain things would trigger me and I would have this like visceral response in my body. And I didn't know what that was or what to do with it. And I started hearing about like Peter Levine's work and Gabor Mate's work. And then out of nowhere, we have a mutual friend who called me up one day and said, Nastasha, you got to check out this breath work. This guy, Steven Jaggers, his work is going to change the world. And I was like, signed up, okay. Well, actually, I didn't sign up that easily. I looked into it. I almost signed up and I was like, why am I going to a facilitator training? Like I have a full-time job. Like I'm not trying to be a breathwork facilitator, but it's the only way to access you and the breath work at the time. And so I was like, I wanted to experience it, but I was like, no. And the universe has a funny way of, making me do what I'm supposed to do, because it was like a week later, you guys announced your your first ever San Diego training. And I was like, okay, it's literally coming to me. I have no excuse. And I remember signing up and just sitting there that first day, and you were talking about Peter Levine and Gabor Mate and all these things. And I was like, wait a minute, this is where I'm supposed to be. And then having my first experience with what you're talking about, where it's like there was things coming up out of me, that were stored literally inside of my body, and I couldn't consciously remember them, but breathing into those spaces. And one of the things that I love that you guys do that was different to any breath work was like, you're not trying to give me comfy things like little eye masks and blankies and things like that to keep me comfortable. You were like, in fact, if you feel uncomfortable, breathe into that. It's like, what is this? No. But in doing that, when that discomfort came up and I would breathe into those spaces, that's where like things came up for me that I was able to like release. So I love it. Obviously I have my own experience with it. I guess I'm kind of curious to know, I know you had a background in body work. I know a little bit about your history, but how was somatic breathwork born? Like what was the
Yeah.
inspiration for you that led to you creating this modality? And if you had a profound experience, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. There's been so many moments in my life that really led up into this point. And if I really look back at it, it's almost like from birth. I feel like it was kind of destined to happen, even from my parents and my upbringing. And my parents that struggled with addiction and prescription medication and anxiety and depression and alcoholism and a lot of the modern issues that a lot of people are dealing with. And so growing up around that, I always had a desire to understand what is causing them to suffer in this sort of way. Because, as a child myself, I think I was always just stoked to be alive. I mean, I grew up in Southern California as well. A skateboarder, very athletic, always in my body, always out running the streets and, skateboarding and just playing sports and hiking. And I really, it took me a while to realize this, but, I loved being in my body because it allowed me to not necessarily think about what's going on at home. I wasn't
Hmm.
thinking about the past. I wasn't thinking about the future. I was in the present moment right here, right then. And,
Okay.
fast forward, I, went to school for addiction psychology and also physical therapy. I was at this halfway point where I was like, I don't know if I want to go into like sports medicine and helping people with their physical body, or do I want to go into like psychology and understanding the mind on a deep level and what causes people to, specifically around addiction. And a lot of
Hmm.
that came from, part of it came from either dealing with injuries and physical stuff for myself, and then also watching my parents kind of struggle from that place. And I went to school for both of those, and I ended up dropping out because I just did not resonate with the way things were being taught.
Yeah.
From the physical standpoint, things were very mechanical,
Mhm.
looking at the body as this mechanism of, levers and pulleys and
Yeah.
very robotic. And then from the psychology side of thing, it's like everything's based on this book called the DSM-4, and you're labeling people under a specific diagnosis, and then there's specific medications that help to mitigate the symptoms. And it just didn't. There was a voice inside of me that I'm really happy that I developed the ability to listen to, because even though my family and friends and everyone was like, you need to go to school for this,
Right.
you need to become something in the world, right?
Mhm. Yes.
um, i was like I was like, it's not the way. And I ended up dropping out and went down some other routes that I might not get into, but I ended
Okay.
up kind of having a spiritual awakening myself. And I use that term lightly. I would say most of it actually happened in the dream realms. Actually, I started experiencing lucid dreams, and I
Wow.
didn't really know what this phenomenon was. And I was about 21 at the time, and I was a heavy cannabis user when I was younger, and I think I was
Okay.
self-medicating in a lot of ways, and I ended up just one day kind of stopping, and the result of that was that I had this massive REM reuptake that happened,
Wow.
and I started having a ton of like lucid dreams, to the point of it kind of freaking me out a little bit. And I'm like, what is this phenomenon? And I started looking it up online, and thank God we live in the age of information, right? And then that led me down a rabbit hole of studying or learning altered states of consciousness and your energy body and dream realms and astral projection and all this stuff that was just kind of blowing my mind.
Yes.
And through that, I learning about the our energetic anatomy was the most fascinating to me, because I had studied kinesiology and anatomy, and it never taught me anything about energetic anatomy. Um, and from that place, I found a school, a holistic based school that taught a lot of different types of body work, specifically Eastern perspectives on body work, and also somatic based body works that
Okay.
really just made a lot of sense to me. And I ended up just kind of going fully into that route and studying cranial sacral therapy, understanding the nervous system and how it's the same thing as our chakra system that has been, studied for thousands of years. And we have nerve bundles at all of those different centers that control all of the glandular and musculoskeletal functions on each of those sort of energy lines that people have known about for a very long time. And through that, just really, as soon as I got my hands on someone's body, all of the stuff that I had studied, it really started to make sense to me, and not make sense to my mind like we think in our
Right.
culture, but it made
Mm-hmm.
sensation. It made sensation, and I could watch people really move through a lot of different things. So I fell in love with a multitude of different bodywork techniques, and quickly became an instructor at a holistic school and taught multiple forms of body work. And through that process of studying and really distilling, I'll continue. So then I found breath work through my first I'd say introduction to that was through Kundalini yoga, and also
Okay.
Wim Hof, which it didn't really resonate with me a lot. Like, I'm like, okay, this is powerful. And until I started, you know, recreationally using a couple different types of psychedelics, and not in the probably not in the best way, but they were helping me in some sort of way, and I wanted to study them, and I wanted to know who and what institutions really were kind of behind the legit studies of these psychedelics. And I found this organization called MAPS. And then
Okay.
from there, MAPS connected me to holotropic breath work from Stan Groff, who had been studying breath work for a long time. I
Right.
did a session with him,
No
and
way.
in 2017 I did a session with him, and um, I had more physical release in my body than I had from any body work, acupuncture, therapy session. I had more emotions flood through me, and a tremendous amount of anger, sadness that had been locked up in my body, specifically in my thoracic spine.
Wow.
I had been diagnosed with some scoliosis when I was younger, and through that breath work, about 30 minutes in, and for those people that don't know, holotropic breath work is really intense and probably not necessary for the general population, but
Uh-huh.
um,
Isn't it like
uh,
3 hours, or like, isn't
it's
it some crazy amount of time?
it's designed to really promote an out of body psychedelic experience. And unless you've done a lot of breath work, it's probably too much for most
Mhm.
people. I've taken the stance of less is more at this point, but
Mhm.
I, as soon as I started getting into the breath work, and about 30 minutes in, I was able to expand quite a bit more as far as my diaphragm. And for those people that are listening that don't know anatomy completely, your diaphragm actually connects. It originates in your lumbar spine, and so I felt a pop in my spine, and I was flooded with all these emotions, and it moved through me, and I saw like my childhood flash before my eyes, and my relationship with my parents, and how I was just so angry and sad, and then how much actual like how much pressure I actually put on them and judgment towards them as well, because they just were doing the best that they could do at the time, and really like forgiving them. And after I had that flood, that release, if you will,
That's massive,
I
by the
be
way. I mean,
I
it's like a whole lifetime of pent up. That's in one 30-minute. That's wild.
in one session. And it wasn't even about, like I said earlier, it wasn't about the release either. Like the release was powerful, but it was about the clarity that I had afterwards. And that clarity that came through was that before I'm a body worker, before I'm a teacher, before I'm a coach, a therapist, whatever my title is, I'm actually a breath worker first, because
Mm,
we are all attuning to each other's breath, whether or not we realize it or not, because the breath is the number one thing that's controlling the state of your nervous system. And if you are holding your breath, well, then, and you are in a state of fight or flight, then your body is in a contracted state. And if you're doing talk therapy with somebody, if you're doing body work with somebody, if you're doing personal training, if you're guiding yoga and someone's not breathing, then
mm,
nothing that you're doing with them is actually landing with them, because they're in a defensive state. And so
mm.
I started to take the perspective of, wow, I'm a body worker, or I'm a breath worker first, I'm a body worker second. And so I started to utilize breath work first, and then utilizing the other modalities second. And I just saw that it was landing so much more for people. It was less work on myself. There was more transformation that was happening. The results were lasting longer. There was more of an
Wow.
empowerment aspect, because I'm not sitting there doing something to somebody. They're actively participating in their own transformation. And so it was a profound shift for me. And, fast forward, I, right when COVID hit, I had a few clients that were therapists that I was, doing a bunch of different stuff with them when it came to breath work and body work and coaching and all this stuff. And I had a woman ask, uh, if I could teach her what I do with her. And at that point in time, I'm like, wow, I really miss teaching, and I know how to create a curriculum and a lesson plan. And I, kind of took 2 months and just went into a cave and created the
Wow.
first iteration of the curriculum for this modality that we called somatic release breathwork. And now it's somatic breathwork. But and at this point in time, like, 3.5 years later, now we have, 1,200 practitioners worldwide and
Wow.
37 different countries. And we're fully accredited to offer continuing education credits to mental health specialists and doctors and psychologists. And it's been a wild ride,
That's
Nastasha, but
that is incredible. I mean, what a journey in such a short time too. It just goes to show when your heart's in the right place, when you're creating something and your heart's in the right place, you're doing it for the right reasons. I think that the universe just organizes for you to make it just work. When I tell the story of choice and the creation of choice, I'm always like, it was divine. It wasn't even me. My heart was in the right place, and the universe just organized so perfectly at the right time and the right place for it to just like unfold the way that it did. And I feel that with you. Something you said when you were explaining your journey was like, it kind of was always there, from the beginning. And
yeah,
one of the questions I have for you, because we have a very similar background, and something people ask of me often is like, is it nature versus nurture? And I love to ask this question of people because I just love their opinion. Coming into an environment where your parents are both drug addicts, or, struggling with addiction, I should say, and, in the throes of the human condition. And, here you are, and you're, just like you have this I love life and this zest for life and being in the body, and this mindset of wanting to understand their pain and wanting to almost like fix it in some ways, right? When we study like the
yeah,
psychology, we want to understand what was wrong, why they were the way that we are, so we can fix them, right? In some ways. And so I guess my question is, do you think that you just kind of came in with this wiring? Was it nature? Was it nurture? Was it people around you?
yeah.
Like, what was it?
This is one of my favorite topics, and I'm so excited that you asked this. The way that I like to think about it, and this is kind of recent for me, one of my mentors, his name is Thomas Hubel, and he says that he explains that what happens when your parents get together. When your parents get together, you have your mom and the dad, and when they obviously make love, create you, right? What's happening is that they are combining their DNA, they're combining their biology, and they're handing this gift to you. And this gift is your nervous system and your body and your being. And it's the greatest gift you could ever be given. And they're handing you all of their unprocessed trauma, all of the things that they never completed, and all of the things that they never processed and digest. But they're also handing you over their strengths, their new adaptive patterns, all the things, all the good and all the bad, right? It's ancestral, and it's passing it down the line. And if we had the perspective of looking at it as like every time this generational unfolding, we're handing the gift off to the next generation. And what we're asking them is we're saying, here, this is what was passed to me. This is the best that I could do.
Wow.
Take this gift, make it better, and pass it down the line. Do the best that you can, and pass it to the next generation, right? And
That is
so
beautiful. Here's the torch. This is as far as I took it.
what'd
Now
you
it's your
say?
turn. Here's the torch, like this is as far
Here's
as I
the
could take
torch,
it.
right?
Yeah, take the torch
This
and
is as far as I
now you run as far as you can go with it, Wow, what a
exactly. And
beautiful way of looking at that. I've been studying family constellation recently, kind of geeking out on that. I read a book recently that said the title of the book was like, It Didn't Start With You, and it was a fascinating read. And in the book, they were talking about the study that they did with, I think it was like mice, where they had exposed them to like a wild cherry scent, and then they shocked them, and they exposed them and shocked them, and did this repeatedly until they had developed PTSD, like signs of PTSD. And they took their sperm and they put it in a female mouse, and then they took the offspring, and then that offspring had the same signs of PTSD, even though they'd never been exposed to the wild cherry scent. So they're showing, we've always known, right, that we pass down our trauma as well as the gifts, right? We get the
yeah,
good looks, and we also get the,
yeah,
the crutches and things like that too. So it's fascinating that you're touching on that. And, but that the way of looking at that as the gift, that it is. And also this is the best that I could do with it in my lifetime,
yeah,
that's really, I teared up when you said that. That's very beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah. And it's important for people to have this understanding that you are living in a body that's ancient. You're living in a bio supercomputer that has taken thousands and thousands of years to develop, and it's learned a lot of really, really intelligent functions that our minds can't even understand. And when it comes to, like, this is why I'm so fascinated by somatics, is because it's a orientation and a lens to view working with your body from a perspective of nature. And I think that as our culture has continued, we have cut ourselves off more and more from nature, and we have cut ourselves off from the nature of our being as well, the nature of our body, just as much as
Absolutely.
we're like, it's reflected as the same thing with our body. We're disconnected from the nature of our body, just like we're disconnected from from nature itself. And the more we do that, the more issues we face. And so somatics really looks at the body from a bottom-up perspective. Like, let's look at the biology first. Let's work with our very ancient defense systems that have been passed down for a long time, such as, the very basic ones that people probably know is fight, flight, freeze. And what's going on is that those are embedded in you. Like, your instincts, your reptilian brain, your basal ganglia, for those that are anatomy nerds, um, what goes on is that those instincts have been passed down for a long time, and those are the patterns that are passed down for your own individual survival. And so when something happens that's stressful or a traumatic instant, you are designed to not even have to think about it, but to move towards something, to fight it, to move away from something, to flight from it, or to freeze in the moment. And that's not necessarily, yeah, they're like, okay, right. That's not necessarily something that your mind has to think about. It's already embedded within you. And then after that, like, then looking at the emotional realm, connective tissue of life, they are the things, they are the responses, the patterns that bring people closer together or also push people apart. It's the push and pull of our social dynamics. And emotions are probably the thing that is driving us as a human more than anything. They're the things that create relationships. They're the things that create babies. They're the things that create war. And those are the things that will eventually stop war when people don't want to feel, the pain of hurting each other anymore. And so as disconnected as we've become from our instincts and emotions, we live in a world that is so much in our head and our psyche. And so the process of somatics is, let's reconnect to the nature of our being, of these patterns that have been passed down for a long time. And the question of nature and nurture is that we were passed down these patterns, but then we have the ability to reconnect and to reintegrate these parts of ourselves and the connection of them, and teach the youth how to do it and pass it down the line, because it is nature and nurture in a way.
So good. I think that that's fascinating. One of the things that I found most fascinating is, how far we've come away from how to process things that happen to us, because we live in this, we're wearing these clothes, and we're not grounded in nature. We live in these houses. We live in, we're not like in nature anymore as we once were. And I feel like we've lost a lot of the abilities that maybe we once had. I'd be curious to know your thought on that. But I think it was Gabor Mate's book, Myth of Normal, but I could be wrong about that, where he talks about like the bird that flies into the window. And then it falls to the ground, and the tendency of the humans are to like run over and like pick up the bird. But actually, if you pick it up, you'll kill it. That you need to leave it alone, because after a few big breaths, it kind of shakes. And it's releasing that trauma because it naturally, instinctually knows what to do with that trauma. And I feel like because of the way that we've evolved as people, far away from nature, we've lost that ability to know how to do those processes. And so in doing that, we've stored a lot of stuff, and then it's been passed on, as we were talking about that torch, like passed on and passed on and passed on. But I do think that this new generation, things are shifting. And I think, people like you saying no to that path that was laid out for you. I know for me as well, it's like trying to study, Western nutrition. I was like, this does not resonate with me. Like, this is not it for me. And, venturing out on my own path with that. And I think, people that are brave enough to do that, to say no to what society tells us we're supposed to do, and explore our own curiosities and explore our own, what lights us up inside and what feels good. And even though it's scary and unknown, and sometimes we end up in these places where like, what the hell am I doing here? Like this doesn't look good to anybody, like this doesn't look like what I'm supposed to be doing, but then you keep going, and then you end up exactly where you were always meant to be.
Yeah, you had a lot of really good points there. And I think one thing that is important for people to realize, and this is outlined in Gabor Mate's book, Myth of Normal, is that most of the pathologies, the sicknesses, the issues that we're facing, they're a very normal response to an abnormal environment. Like right now we have this idea of the new normal, right? Or our world is normal right now, and it's actually really not normal. And the issues of anxiety and depression and addiction and alcoholism and suicide and all of these things that we're facing, it's actually a very normal response to the way that we're living, because the way that we're living is not normal. And I use this example of just if you just look at the physical body, like right now, I'm sitting in a chair and my hips are getting tight from sitting in this chair. And that tension in my hips is a very normal response to an abnormal situation for my body. My body was not designed to sit in this chair. And so this tension that I'm experiencing, which, if I did it for 40 years, maybe I'm going to need a hip replacement at some point. It's a very normal response to sitting in a chair. And so you look at that, you apply that same thing to life. We're living in a box. We're eating our food from a box. We're sleeping in a box. We're isolated from nature. We're isolated from each other. We're eating food. We're eating food with no nutrition in it. And we're experiencing all of these issues that are very normal responses to an abnormal way of living. And to the second point that you were talking about is, one of my favorite quotes, and I'm not necessarily I never grew up religious, but it's a quote in the Bible, and that is, unless you become as a child, you will never be able to enter the kingdom of heaven. And you look at a child before they have all of these societal impressions and cultural impressions that are pressed upon them. They're so in touch with the natural intelligence of their body. Something happens to them, something stressful happens to them, well, they immediately start throwing a temper tantrum. Or they immediately start finding, and our job is to show them how to move things through them in a healthy way. Because obviously we can't throw a temper tantrum in the middle of the store, but we can show them, we can enroll them in martial arts. We can give them a musical instrument that gives them a way to express themselves beyond words. We can show them and give them different healthy ways to process things, to move through them, instead of them telling them to sit down, shut up, be quiet, and training the nature of their being out of them. Yes. And so, I sit with that quote and it's can we reconnect to our innate intelligence that's so pure inside of a child that they already understand? And one other thing I'll say on that is, when it comes to somatic breathwork, the only reason why somatic breathwork is getting popular is because we've weeded out and we've lost a lot of the natural ways that we process things out of our system. There's a quote that's if you were sick and you went to a shaman, they'd ask you, when was the last time, or when did you stop singing? When did you stop dancing? When did you stop telling stories? When did you stop yourself from crying? When did you stop connecting to the earth? And, I think about a lot of cultures that they would have ceremony around a fire where people would be singing and dancing and crying and yelling and screaming and doing it all together with no judgment. Wherever you are at right now in this moment, whatever needs to move through you, all is welcome here, and you are absolutely part of this tribe, and we will keep you a part of this tribe no matter what's going on. And we don't have that anymore.
No. Well, we do if you go to a somatic breathwork facilitator training, because that was my first experience with becoming aware that I had inhibited myself from allowing expression of emotion. I was in my very first, session, the first time you guys give us a taste of what it is, and a guy in the back started screaming. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I was scared. And then I also was aware that I felt like I couldn't be scared. I had to have it all together. And I couldn't allow that, because I needed to look like I knew what I was doing and I had it all together. And in the breathing, I remember having that awareness, and then letting it go. And then all this emotion came up. And I had a vision of myself as a little girl in a corner in a hallway, screaming and crying. And my family, they never knew what to do with me when I had emotion. Just like I'd had big emotions. I think I'd bottle, and then something would happen and I would explode. And I was probably crying about a lot of big, heavy things. But in the moment, maybe I was crying about my crayon getting taken, or whatever it is. But in the moment, my family's like, she's crazy. You're too big. You're too much, stop, 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 stop. And I developed that about myself, like that voice. I inherited that voice. And so whenever I feel emotion, or used to, whenever I would feel emotion, I'd be like afraid to let it out, afraid because it would get too big and I would upset people, or make people go away from me, because I would scare them with my emotion. And I remember the first time being in there, breathing and allowing myself to just let it out, and knowing, and I remember you guys saying that, like every expression is welcome here, and just feeling like this full acceptance, like I was allowed to be me here, all of me, not just, the smiley, happy, positive Nastasha that everyone loves, but also the snot nose, crying, emotional being that I also am. So beautiful, beautiful work that you have created. And again, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here today and have this conversation was because I'm so inspired by your work. My next question is just curiosity. What's next for you? Where does somatic breathwork go from here? What's your
Yeah,
goal? What's your vision with that?
it's such a tough question, Nastasha. Right now, I mean, up until this point, it has been so guided, and I have had visions for it and goals for it, and it feels meek to what has actually happened in a way. And I think baseline, I try to just continue to clear myself enough and ask myself, well, what is the world needing? What is the world wanting? And what does the world want this to become? And how do I align myself to that? Like what way can what skills and a mastery that I have that's true to me that I can then offer to it. And lately, like we have a team of probably 15 different people, maybe more than that actually, with extensions of people. And it has Somatic has a lot of hands in it at this point. And it's been really beautiful to actually allow other people to feel ownership of it, and to put their own to bring their own magic to it. And so it's been a process of letting go for me, because I like control, and I have thoughts and ideas of where I want it to go. And also it's a living, breathing entity in itself.
It is.
And
pun intended.
it started, I truly feel like, okay, it chose me as the vessel to come through at this point in time. And and now it's been birthed from me, right? When we create a business, and now it's its own living, breathing entity. And I'm currently, right now, I'm in a place of like, okay, how do I now show up to support where it is wanting to go? And also, how do I continue to grow? Part of it is, when you create a business, it really can become your identity in a way. And it can ask for certain parts of you to come through, and for certain aspects of yourself to really step up. And for me, that was like the teacher and, you know, the practitioner. And there's a lot of other sides of me that I'm kind of exploring, and mostly around my artistry. And I've been learning like music production and creative writing. And so I'm currently in a state of really trying to just tap into my own artistry, to allow other people to also bring their magic to it. And, you know, now we're fully accredited, and it's really turning into an institution at this point. We're going to have a lot of other things besides the practitioner training to offer. And yeah, I just spent the last 4 months probably on the biggest project that I've ever done, which is the recreation of all my curriculum.
Wow.
I met a woman who worked at Harvard in curriculum design, and I've been working diligently with her for the past 4 months to recreate the current curriculum from a Harvard level curriculum standpoint. Now that we're accredited, and we're almost done with it, so it's put me back a little bit on, you know, creating level 2 and a couple other things. I mean, there's a lot of things in the works. We'll see where it goes. I don't have a clear answer for that question, but
Good. That's okay. That's okay. I think it's an interesting question, right? I mean, sometimes we know where we're going and what we're doing. And I relate a lot because when I first started my business, you know, I knew what I was doing and where I was going and how many stores and, you know, how many humans I wanted to touch. And then at somewhere along the way, like you said, it becomes its own living, breathing thing. And, you know, you do kind of step back a little bit and have to ask, like, what does this want to become? And it's not so much you as the driving force anymore. It's kind of like this collective process, if you will. And so there is a little bit of a letting go and seeing what shows up. I do think that kind of divine inspiration happens when it's time, and you always know what, you know, you kind of always know what's next when it's time for something to happen next. It's beautiful that you're tapping into your art.
I can share one other thing that I've really been working on, and this is something that is near and dear to my heart. And I think because you went through the breathwork training, and it's so much more than breathwork. It's not necessarily about breathwork, but the thing that I find that lands the most for people is the word that I've been using is meta skills. And what I believe meta skills are the energetic and subtle skill sets that really make someone a masterful practitioner, but beyond that, like a masterful human. And I'll give some examples of that. Is the ability to host another person's emotions inside of yourself, to become an empathetic witness, the ability to develop our range of expression, our emotional capacity, our resilience, our ability to align ourselves and maintain a deep connection to our innate intelligence and our own soul, to always be able to bring ourselves back into balance. And so these meta skills are really what I'm fascinated in defining and teaching and helping humans remember, because they're not new things. They're things that are already innate within us. We just have forgotten how to do them. And I think me personally, I truly believe that those skill sets are the things that are the most important thing for me to focus on right now when it comes to the state of the world. And I'll just say one last thing is that, you know, being in the healing space, if you will, that I think there's a misconception on what healing actually is. From a somatic perspective, healing and integration are the same thing. Integration just means that I'm reconnecting, that I'm weaving the web of myself back together, that I'm reconnecting and reclaiming all the parts of myself. It's an integration. Somatic breathwork is an integration modality. It's, can I connect to the full range of myself? And when I look at that, that is happening not just internally within ourselves, but can I integrate with other humans? Can I weave the web of connection between people back together? And that is what makes somatic breathwork so special, is that it's not a self-practice. It's a practice that's done together. Because human connection and communing is one of the greatest, was one of our deepest purposes here in this lifetime, and that's my perspective.
Beautiful. I love that. Okay, you mentioned something about being an empathetic witness, which I remember from taking the training. Healing happens in the presence of an empathetic witness. And I guess I'm curious to know, is empathy something that you can teach? Is that something that you've experienced, like being able to teach somebody empathy? Or is empathy something that happens in your experience as a result of, life experience, having been able to hold space for your own feelings and emotions and experience the range of the human condition, opening you up to empathy for other people in those positions? Or can anybody be empathetic, even if they're holding space for somebody who hasn't, or who's experiencing something they've never experienced before, or an emotion that they've never touched on themselves?
I think innately all humans are empathetic, and I think that we, the opposite of empathy is, well, you could say narcissism in a way, but you could say separation and isolation. Empathy means that I can feel you, and you can feel that I'm feeling you. And what a way to describe that is co-regulation in a way. Our nervous systems, I have an electrical bubble around me, that some people would call it your aura or your electromagnetic field. And when we are together, our electromagnetic fields are in communication with each other. And being able to feel the quality of that energy, of that that connection, is a skill set that allows someone to become empathetic. Can I host another person? What I teach, and this is like learning how to become empathetic, is a part of attunement. Attunement is, can I become aware of the quality of energy between us? Like there's a Wi-Fi signal between me and you. And like there's a data stream, if you will. And sometimes that data stream is really strong. But sometimes that data stream is not so strong. Like we don't feel understood. We're not maybe, and a lot of us have been sold that this idea of communication is like the most important thing. But it's not. It's actually understanding. And we've all heard this term called, like, that's coined, like being seen and heard, right? We want to feel seen. We want to be heard by another person. But it's not about like me looking at you, because I could see you right now. And I could hear what you're saying, but we want to be felt. We want to be felt. And you want to be like, you want to know that I'm feeling you and you're feeling me, and we're on the same page, and there's a quality and there's a strong energetic connection between us, that we actually get each other. We get each other. And that's desired on a human, like on a deep intrinsic level. And the opposite of that is apathy, is numbness. And to me, that's what I feel like the biggest epidemic in the world is, that we have become apathetic. We become numb to ourselves, and also numb to each other. We can't feel each other. And an example of this is like, I've really been sitting on this. This is one of the things that I think is the most important when it comes to our developmental stages is when you're a child, we learn how to co-regulate first. When a child is born, it doesn't know how to take care of itself. It needs its parents, and it has needs and wants and desires, and it needs parents that can attune, that can feel the child and where they're at and what it actually needs. And if you're a child and you have a need or have a want or a desire, and it's not necessarily, it's not attuned to in a healthy way, what happens is that, well, you feel like you actually don't have a say in the world anymore. That you're actually just living in somebody else's world, that they're creating the world, and what you say doesn't really matter, doesn't make a difference. What happens is, okay, now we're not in co-creation anymore. We're not creating this reality together. And so what I say or do doesn't matter, then what you say or do doesn't matter, because we're actually not affecting each other. And over time, that starts to breed apathy, meaning that that humans can dump toxins, hundreds of miles away in a river, and not think about that water will eventually make up the water in the body of your children's children.
Wow.
And so this aspect of being able to attune and feel other people allows us to feel like we are in this together and we are co-creating together, and what I say or do affects you and what you say or do affects me, and we're a part of this human team on planet Earth.
I love that.
And
beautiful
just
share.
I went down a rabbit hole, but to answer your question,
I love it.
to answer your question, empathy is innate within us. We're designed to feel each other. And some people have more of a default state of being more individualist or being more, community and people oriented. But like empathy is a natural, innate human thing that we just need to remember, meaning that we need to put the parts back together because it's already there within us.
Going back to that integration and that, weaving that web back together in our whole state. That's beautiful. Thank you. Well, I hope the world does relearn that empathetic quality, because I do think it's lacking, and it's exciting to see this work. And I think that our mutual friend was right when he said this work will change the world, and we're seeing that now. And thank you for answering the call and listening to that message in your heart that led you to creating this work. And thank you for being here today and having this conversation with me. If people want to find somatic breath work and learn more about it, where can they do that? Where can they find out more information? And where can they find your art? I want to know more about this art too.
I'm going to be releasing some music here soon. I still have a lot of responsibility when it comes to somatic, but I'm playing in that realm a lot, and I'm really excited to release some stuff here soon. That being said, if people want to learn more about somatic breathwork, you can just look us up on almost every platform when it comes to social media, or you can go to somaticbreathwork.com. We have online and in-person trainings for, if you are a health professional, if you're licensed, if you need CEUs, or if you're just someone who's fascinated in this and wants to learn these techniques for yourself. We would be honored to have you. So you can reach out to me, Steven Jaggers, across the board. And as you can tell, I nerd out on this stuff and love to talk about it for as long as I can. And there's nothing else I'd rather be doing with my time before it's my time.
I love it. Thank you again for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Nastasha. This was great. Let's do it again soon.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening in. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could leave a review so we can reach more people. I might even share your review on future episodes. If you go to the link in the show notes, you can find and sign up for our newsletter so that you're notified when a new episode comes out. You can support the show by purchasing anything from the Choice Juicery online shop at choicejuicery.com. Or, of course, if you're lucky enough to live in San Diego, you can visit any of our 7 locations here in San Diego and Orange County. And please feel free to connect with me on social media at Nastasha McKeon. That's NASTASHAMCKEON. Don't forget that extra S. Or you can connect with us at the Choice Juicery Instagram at Choice Juicery. Thanks again for listening in.